happy New Year to everyone. I hope everyone had a very nice vacation. And we are glad, like I said, we are very glad that you are all here joining again for the Learning Lab of today about sustainability. The speaker of today will be Wiep Fokker. She's the co-founder of Plant for Tomorrow in English, but she will talk about that later on. With Rescaled, we've been thinking about sustainability and what does it mean if you want to build a detention house. How can you make and create a sustainable detention house? And sustainability to Rescaled is not only simple like having green around the detention house or having an outside space to walk, but it's more. It's actually with sustainability we are referring to a future-oriented approach, socially, economically, and environmentally. So. And that's quite complex. I think it's not easy. It sounds maybe simple or it sounds complex, but when you're trying to translate this into practice, what does that actually mean? And this is why we have asked Wiep to think about this in the context of WISH EU project, because it's about the ecosystem of a detention house.
So welcome everyone. The best wishes for the new year to start with. My name is Wiep Fokker indeed, and since September I have been working at the WISH EU project, and I'm part of restorative justice in the Netherlands. So that's why I'm here today. I'm working on sustainability and I'm especially focused on small-scale detention houses, of course. So that is what we're talking about today. So this is me, just a short introduction. I'm also the co-founder of the Dutch organization Plantje voor Morgen. In English, it sounds a bit silly. It sounds something like, plants for tomorrow. But I prefer to say it in Dutch. I started, this interest started about 2.5 years ago, and my organization is still working, actually, and it focuses on implementing sustainability and green space within Dutch prisons. So that is not entirely focused on the small-scale detention houses, but that is what I'm working on at Restorative Justice. So we started this because we noticed the urgency to apply sustainability goals to Dutch detention, because it was not a scene in which sustainability had a big part already. And it still needs to be implemented very deliberatively. So a lot of work to do. With my work at Restorative Justice Nederland, or the Netherlands, I aim to connect the fields of small-scale detention and sustainability, because as Veronique already mentioned, it is more about sustainability is more about not only the green energy supply, but also about long-term visions and solutions that fit for the long term. Let's start this session. I wanted to start the session with a question, and therefore I would like you to ask to go to mentimeter.com, that you can just open it on your phone and use the code that is on the screen. And then I would like to ask you if you would give some small answers in words or sentences, like what could sustainability mean in relation to small detention houses? For you, what would it mean? You would be thinking about it. And if it doesn't work, if you couldn't If you cannot figure it out, like how it works, please let me know. And then I will share my screen in a different way. Let's see how I do it. Yes, there is a hands up.
Yes, hi, I'm Valerian. I'll try to answer, to give you at least a feedback about what you were presenting. So maybe it's in terms of how it was conceived, in terms of urbanistic place, materials, passive energy, you know, trying not to need a lot of energy to make this place work. But it's also in terms of more a metaphor. You know that people are here, they have to come back to the social body, it has to be a long-term perspectives. There is a metaphor between sustainability in terms of the environment and in terms of how do we regulate deviances and reintegrate people. So that would be the two first things I had in mind.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. Yeah. And I'm trying to, let's see where it is. Yeah, I see on my screen like circularity, reusing buildings, sustainable communities, real change of criminal justice system. That is indeed something like real change. Something also mentioned, the ability to exist on its own means whilst contributing to society as a whole, showing incarcerated people that even though they are being punished, they can still play a meaningful role in the community through environmental sustainability, etc. Yeah, I think you all sent really interesting answers. And I think you are already really involved in this on both the social and environmental part. So let's go back to the presentation today. Thank you for your interaction. Because yeah, when speaking about sustainability goals on a European level, some of you might think of the 17 sustainability development goals. I didn't think I noticed it in the Mentimeter, but anyway, some of you might be familiar with it already. To sort of introduce this, in 2015, all member states of the United Nations adopted these goals, and it provides a certain framework for both peace and prosperity for both people and planets, and for now and in future. So indeed, on the long term, and it not only contains goals for countering climate change, but it also aims for the development of human beings in terms of education, well-being, and equality, as you can see in the goals. Yeah, they can be seen as a sort of a blueprint for sustainable development goals for sustainable development for both organizations and governments. So a lot of organizations already use them, and in a lot of countries, there is like a sustainable, sort of an SDG chart already working on implementing those goals in all sorts of organizations. And also for detention, it can be very helpful to use it when looking at the long term. So also on the field of social sustainability. But as Veronique already mentioned, sustainability is a subject that is very sort of hard to define because it's very broad and complex in a way. So a lot of organizations used to define this by using the three categories or dimensions: people, planets, and profits. But now the last few years, it has been prosperity instead of profit, because profit was really economically oriented, and prosperity is more about the balance between well-being and economic, financially stability. And these are also sometimes defined as the social sustainability, ecological sustainability, and economic sustainability. So that might clear it up a bit. Yeah, and in my work for the WISH EU project on the small-scale detention houses, I have been working on dividing sustainability into 9 dimensions. So each of the dimensions that's mentioned here, I divided those in 3 sort of levels: the micro level, the meso level, and the macro level. So yeah, let's dive a bit deeper into that today. Let's start with people, also the social sustainability part. And in my work, I have been sort of identifying the different SDGs that are part of this dimension. So the no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, decent work and economic growth, and reduce inequalities. Well, and people, the dimension people is all about the health of people, both living and working in detention facilities, and also their future prospects. So not only for how it is now or in like the term of a year, but also on the long term. Yeah, the first level of the dimension people. As I was saying, it is about the health and future prospects of people. And therefore a distinction can be made between methods and means that are used. And with methods, I mean like the daytime activities that are used in detention for rehabilitation or for recovery. And the means is mostly about the living environment and the materials that are used. So how could these 2 sort of dimensions work in favor of the health of people and for their prospects? Well, and therefore it should always be taken into account that it should be a long-term vision, as was already mentioned. And with daytime activities, for example, one can think about the different kinds of interaction that happen in such facilities, and also, for example, relational security. I think there was also already a learning lab about that. Then the living environment, for example, what I have been working on and what combines both the ecological and the social sustainability is adding green space to the living environments in detention. It is often proven that, more proven actually, that the effects of contact with nature are very positive for like every human being. Almost every human being. So adding those green spaces and natural elements into this living environment could help improving the living, sort of the sphere that is created. And it's already proven to have positive effects on both staff and people living in detention. If you want to know more about the research that has already been done, I could send you some links afterwards, but it's too much to now elaborate on. Furthermore, for the living environment, for example, the amount of daylight that could come into a building, that is also very important for one's health. So let's move on to the next level, the meso-level, because the next question will be how to bring certain values into practice in order to create those long-term effects on both health and prospects. And therefore, we should all be aware of key points to take into account when designing new daytime activities and when creating a living environment of both new and already existing detention facilities. And the meso level is on national level, so that is about the organization on the national level, always with like the long-term effects in mind, and also looking beyond the borders of detention itself. So partnering with organizations that already work with on restorative justice, and also for prevention and after rehabilitation. Yeah, so that's more like the organization of how these effects could be ensured on a national level. And on a macro level, this could be linked to the, the 6 SDGs that I mentioned before. This is about European level. All these goals are sort of translated into a language that everyone should understand. So if you talk about SDGs, every country, well, at least in the EU, should understand what you're saying. So that is really helpful, I think. Yeah, and it should also be interesting to look at the Declaration of Human Rights, of course, also adopted by the UN. And it is interesting to look at legislation by the EU, but this is something that the macro level I haven't been working on yet. So maybe it's interesting if you could give some thoughts about this, how to approach this. Yeah, and maybe it was also the idea that after each dimension you could give some feedback or level of or questions. So now is the time, I think, for the first dimension of people.
Are there thoughts about this? I saw in the chat that somebody was talking about sustainable jobs that are very interesting. Valerian, was that?
Yes, I just added a comment to say also in the end, the outlet also, if after a training or something like that, we orient people that at some times were in prison but are now skilled and able to participate to this developing field of the economy, it's less likely that this is going to be competing with other countries where you don't have the same skills and you cannot, it's not so easy to outsource green jobs. Normally, this is what was said in the economy. So orienting people toward those kind of new jobs is also more interesting, more sustainable than classic industrial delivery business that are too often common in prison or just after prison.
Okay.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you.
Shall we continue to the next? Also, because you have to leave earlier, Wiep, right?
Yeah. You can always send me questions afterwards. I have to go to my university lecture in like a half an hour, so I'm sorry to leave early, but send all your questions afterwards. Yeah, so let's move on to the next dimension, which is planets, and this is about ecological sustainability. And these are the 4 SDGs that I linked to this dimension. This is about energy supply, also the industry, as you mentioned, the consumption and production, and also the quality of life on land. So on a micro level, this means looking at both design and materials, also like the material part and the method part. So the design and materials is about the architecture of the building and surroundings, but also the energy supply. So would you use solar panels or wind energy or something like that? Because it's usually are, quite large institutions, of course, with a lot of energy supply. So, and that's really interesting to look at. Furthermore, it's really important to look at the impact on biodiversity and the surrounding nature of the institution, and also look at its function within the bigger ecosystem. And then with the methods, as I mentioned, also by the people dimension. It is all about like sort of the lifestyle and the consumption pattern. The light switches off. Okay, I hope you can still see me. This is about consumption patterns and lifestyles. Think about the food supply, but also the transport that is needed for those food supplies, but also to bring people to court and back to the detention facility. Is it really necessarily done, or is it, can it be done more in a more sustainable way? And this could all be made visible in, for example, an ecological footprint, and that has already been done by a lot of organizations. Also, the carbon footprint is often used to make it more sort of visible and tangible, what sort of impact organizations have on their environment. And for the Dutch example, the Dutch Judicial Department, Dienst Justitiële Inrichtingen, has already been working on this for a few years. And although they have not been able to change their footprints, it is a very good first step, I think, that they have made it visible in this way. So it should all be within planetary boundaries. And to ensure effects at the larger scale, frameworks or rules are needed at a meso-level. So it's interesting to consider the laws and regulations that determine how government institutions must contribute to achieving national and international sustainability goals. So it should be in line with those regulations. And also, it's very important to wonder oneself, like, is attention actually being paid to implementing climate-friendly energy supply, for example, at a national level? Is it in line with policy and practice? So a lot of things should be considered on the sort of connection between local level and national level. And in the Netherlands, it's currently not in line with each other. So that is really something to work on. But probably in most countries, this is the case. So this is all on a greater level than I explained in the first level, the micro level. Yeah, and the macro level, as I mentioned, the affordable and clean energy industry, responsible consumption and production. Maybe there's someone who wants to, maybe we have time for one addition. What are the thoughts on this dimension? I cannot see the chat. I don't know if someone mentioned it there, but
no, no, I think you can continue.
Okay. I will then. Okay, so let's continue indeed to the last dimension, prosperity. And the two SDGs that I linked to this dimension are the last two ones of the SDG list, because a sustainable detention house should contribute to sort of safeguarding its own working methods and making it work on the long term. So the long term is something I've mentioned many times in this presentation, but it's really important. And also to look at what the impact is on future generations, for example. So on a micro level, this means that when looking at methods and materials, the methods should always be sort of adaptive to and sort of tailor-made, and they should be made in collaboration with local partners, preferably, because they have most of the time they have the best insights into problems and structural solutions that might have a positive impact on the living environments around the custodial institution. With materials, this also means like working with sustainable partners that are in the neighborhood already, or can work it out in a way that works in the long term. This also means strong partnerships, so not working like with every party that comes by, but working on partnerships that work for a long time, to ensure like a stable sort of position of the institution, and also for the people living and working there. On a meso-level, this relates to how these collaborations could be organized from a national level. So would it be like a decentralization, or would it be sort of an overarching organization? Are these pilots or structural projects that happen with lasting impacts or with an impact on the short term? And also here, an adaptive approach is important. And lastly, the prosperity dimension on a macro level. This is really interesting. Actually, this can be seen as a sort of overarching dimension, level, since this is all about sort of the connecting parts of all sustainability levels. So consideration should be given to how global guidelines and rules for small-scale forms of detention can, for example, generate a positive impact for people and also on the environment in the long term at a European level. So collaborations between different countries could be made here, should be made actually. There are already, of course, existing like the European rules for small-scale forms of detention that should be drawn up and that make it possible to monitor this impact regularly. But this is also something I have not been able to dive deep into yet. So all advice or thoughts about this are welcome.
Wiep, maybe I can start with one question, and that is, how are you linking the UN sustainability goals to the different levels of sustainability you also created?
Well, I actually sort of made a list of all the SDGs that fit into each level, but it's mostly like a sort of a tool to remind myself of, okay, am I thinking of this? Because the SDG chart that's on the European and international level, that has been made, has made quite clear guidelines and things to consider when you're working this in your organization. So it's sort of a reminder and also a translation of what we are working on to translate it into sort of the guidelines that are overarching.
There are a lot of subjects related to sustainability, but which are the main parts specific to detention houses?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And indeed, I have been struggling with that too until now. But some things that have positive effects on both, for example, the social and ecological sustainability. That is like, I don't know how to say, but in English, but it's like twee vliegen in één klap in Dutch. To combine one solution for two problems is to add more elements of nature, because it is proven to be very effective on the health of people, and also for ensuring that ecosystems in the neighborhood are linked to each other. So that is how you combine the ecological part and the sustainable materials, and also the green space that has been added to positive effects on biodiversity, but also for the well-being of persons living and working in detention. So that would be like the main thing I would say for now is most relevant for detention houses.
And it's also important, I think, to know that there's a broader framework when you're thinking about sustainability, because often people might think about green space when it comes to sustainability but that's not the only option. So maybe your question is super important, but maybe it's also important to just have the framework that can inspire people in different ways to think about sustainability.
Yeah, and I think what I also noticed when I started working here is that already a lot of work has been done on sustainability, but it has not yet been defined as sustainable. So, for example, the restorative justice part is already a lot of social sustainability, but it has not been called like that. I think it is sort of the, if you were able to name this according to the SDGs, then we would already work on a lot of topics. So then there would be less topics to start working on.
You talked about prosperity at a micro level, and you talked about partnership. I was just wondering, what kind of partnerships were you thinking about? Can you develop on this?
With partnerships, I mean, like, for example, forming collaborations for the food supply, for example. So like the food that is delivered for in detention facilities, that is often coming from like a huge producer, but actually it's far more interesting to look at local examples that work with ecologically responsible ways of producing and consuming food with less pesticides, for example. So that sorts of collaborations, but also with the local community to really embed it into the community that already exists around such a facility. But yeah, it can be very broad, like lots.
First of all, thank you for focusing us and your efforts on the very important issue of ecological sustainability within prisons, and well, make prisons more green environments. Having said that, I have some reflections on what you have said. The first is on the SDGs on people, because what I'm thinking about when I see these SDGs, I guess that with these SDGs and realizing those, we already preventing detention, because if we reach the real SDG people goals, there wouldn't be any prisons at all, I guess. So that's one remark, and it's a circular in itself, because then detention should be aiming at the not only the places of detention, but the time of detention should be aiming at the same SDG goals. So it's very interesting to see there's kind of circularity in the people part of it. Thinking about the planet part, I really like and I already quoted or touched on that, on the subsidiarity of prisons. Because if we don't need them, we don't spend energy on it, and we just have people in our societies. And maybe if we think in small-scale detention facilities, it would be more ecological to have a total different concept, a more sustainable concept of prisons on this planet part. And then the third is the prosperity part. And I guess the challenge for me as a restorative justice thinker and worker and innovator is to redefine strong relationships or strong partnerships to strong bonds on a local level, because the challenge of detention, I guess, is on the level of local communities and local governments. So that's where the prosperous challenge of sustainable future of our whole criminal justice system is, because I think what we are talking about today is not only about the sustainable detention facilities, but it's about a sustainable justice system. And combining the people, the planet, and the profit remarks I made, I guess there is a huge challenge to make this whole system or this whole approach more sustainable, giving these processes back to local communities, to people involved, that know what's needed when we talk about criminal behavior, or behavior we don't call criminal in the future at all, because there are challenges in our local environments, and they are really touched upon by all those SDG goals. So I guess this whole thing makes it much more broader then the only question or the challenge to make our prisons more sustainable environments. So these are my reflections on what you have said already. Thank you so very much, Wiep.
When I was listening to the presentation, I was thinking, what are we already doing here? Because, you know, the detention house is located in a former house for elder people. So we are very focusing on the green here in the detention house. We have two very beautiful gardens where they can go the whole day to have some fresh air. Inside we are also having lots of green. We are focusing on social capital, the building of social capital, lots of social contacts, even with people who don't have social capital the moment they come in. We are trying to get contacts already, also in the local area. We are trying to start them having free time in the local clubs. That is rather important. We were also mentioning that, of course, if you are trying to get some sustainability in food and in the housing, that it takes lots of investments and lots of money if we have to adapt those things. So that's really a very important thing. If we are trying to find new houses now, detention houses in Belgium, I think we have to make this this exercise more than we have already done until now, because I think we have lots of investments to do to get it more sustainable than it is now. So that were our remarks on the subject.
I'm a member of the CPT, and I'm also the chair of a committee at French Fondation de France, which is a big philanthropy foundation. The committee is the prison committee, and we sustain a lot of projects about alternative of detention, links with prisoners and their families, and also projects which are inside and outside of the prisons. And one of the criteria we have for 2 years now is projects which are focused on sustainable development and environment. And in the funding of the projects, we give also some helps to the project to develop their sustainable approach. Not only what you say, Veronique, on the question of energy saving, but on a more extensive approach to have a process which is more eco-saving. There was a question of energy, there was a question of mobility, but there was also the question of education to biodiversity. At this time, there is a new fundamental right, which is the right to access to sustainable, healthy environment, which was decided by the General Assembly of the UN last July. And there is a key questions about detention, which is when there is the development of this access to environment, healthy environment, to be quick, to be short, how it's developed in prison detention facilities and so on. And another question is, when there is not this access clearly defined, is there the possibility of ill treatment, which is a question which is under a lot of developments in the academic community, but also in some committees like the CPT. We are discussing about this subject, and I think that you have to take into account also this development, because it's not it's important on the content, but it's also very important because there is a trend of new links between the communities, NGOs, which are involved in environmental matters, and those who are involved in human rights, the questions of detentions, and so on.
This Learning Lab is part of a larger project called WISH EU, which is working in small-scale detention houses in Europe, and with the aim to really connect professionals working in small-scale forms of detention, open prisons, detention houses, facilities. There are different names in different countries, but all with the aim to connect these professionals, that they get to know each other, but also content-wise, that we discuss what it means to work in a small-scale facility or small-scale detention house, and what the issues are, what the benefits are, and really get into the detailed topics, and all with the aim to write European rules on small-scale detention houses parallel to the European prison rules, so that countries within the EU and hopefully outside of the EU can choose whether they want to build a prison or a small-scale detention house or a small-scale facility. Of course, we hope that more and more countries and organizations will choose community-based forms like detention houses,